All right, let's dive into one of the most intense and honestly gut-wrenching nights in the entire Gospel of Mark. We're going to unpack this story of prophecy, epic failure, and the incredible contrast between divine strength and just human weakness. So the scene is set on the Mount of Olives, right after the Last Supper, and Jesus just drops this bombshell, quoting the ancient prophet Zechariah. It's this chilling prediction that basically frames everything that's about to happen. He's saying, I'm the shepherd, and I'm about to be taken down. And you guys, my flock, you're all gonna scatter. This isn't just a guess, it's a forecast of what's to come. And boom, right away, the central conflict is laid out. You've got Peter, who's always the first to speak up, making this incredibly bold promise. Everyone else might fail, but not me. And then you have Jesus, looking right back at him with this devastatingly specific prediction. It's not just a vague warning. It's, no, Peter, tonight, before a rooster crows twice, you will deny you even know who I am 3 times. The tension is just, wow. Okay, so from there, they all head over to the Garden of Gethsemane. This is really the first big test for the disciples. Jesus asks them to stay and watch with him in his hour of need. And it's right here that the group's promise of solidarity just starts to completely fall apart. And you can actually see how Mark sets up the scene to make you feel Jesus' loneliness. It happens in stages. First, he's with all the disciples. Then, he pulls his inner circle, Peter, James, and John, a little further. And finally, he goes off completely by himself to pray. It's like the camera is zooming in on his isolation, step by painful step. And this is his prayer when he's all alone. He uses the word Abba, which is this incredibly intimate Aramaic word, kind of like saying dad or papa. He asks for this cup to be taken away. And that's a huge deal. In the Old Testament, the cup is a powerful symbol for God's judgment. So he's essentially asking to be spared from this immense burden. But even then, he finishes with, not my will, but yours. It's this incredible moment of surrender. So while Jesus is going through this cosmic struggle, what are his friends doing? The ones who just swore they'd die for him. They're asleep. And Mark hammers this point home. It happens 3 times. Jesus goes to pray, comes back, they're sleeping. He goes again, comes back, still sleeping. They couldn't even manage to stay awake with him for 1 hour. But here's what's so amazing. Jesus doesn't just tear into them. He gives this profound observation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He gets it. He knows they wanted to be there for him, that their intentions were good. But their bodies, worn down by fear and exhaustion, just gave out. I think we can all relate to that gap between what we want to do and what we actually end up doing, right? And then it all comes to a head. Judas shows up with an armed mob, and the garden just explodes. And in this moment, you see 2 completely opposite reactions: total chaos and total control. For the disciples, it's a complete meltdown. A kiss, this beautiful sign of friendship, is twisted into the signal for betrayal. One of them, we know it's Peter from the other Gospels, flails wildly with a sword. It's just panicked, useless violence. And then, just like Jesus said they would, they all run for it. The shepherd is struck, and the sheep are scattered. But Jesus, he's like the calm in the eye of the storm. He doesn't fight back. Instead, he calls out their hypocrisy. He's like, really? Swords and clubs at night like I'm some kind of thief? I was in the temple teaching every day. You could have arrested me then. He's still in command, framing this whole event not as a defeat, but as the fulfillment of a bigger scriptural plan. Now, the action shifts to the high priest's house, and this is where Mark's storytelling gets really brilliant. He cuts back and forth between 2 trials happening at the exact same time. You've got Jesus' official trial inside and Peter's unofficial trial happening out in the courtyard. And right away, you know something's off with this official trial. Based on legal traditions from that time, this whole thing was, well, illegal. It was at night, on the eve of a major holiday, and they couldn't even get their paid witnesses to agree on a story. It's pretty clear this wasn't about justice. It was a rushed job to get the conviction they already wanted. And this slide just lays out the central contrast of the entire night perfectly. Both men are asked, essentially, who are you? Jesus, standing before the most powerful religious leader in the country, gives a clear, bold answer: I am. Meanwhile, Peter, when questioned by a servant girl, just completely falls apart. I don't know this man you're talking about. Now, you have to understand, Jesus' answer is way more than just a yes. When he says, I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, he's quoting the book of Daniel. He's basically telling his judges, you think you're judging me? A day is coming when the roles will be reversed, and I'll be your judge. To the high priest, this is the ultimate blasphemy, and that's all he needs to sentence him to death. So at this point, it feels like a total and complete failure, right? The disciples are scattered, Peter's denied him, it's a disaster. But Mark has been weaving a thread of hope through this whole story, and it really comes through in how he finishes Peter's part of the narrative. So while Jesus is being condemned, Peter is outside, living out the prophecy to the letter. A servant girl points him out. She tells some other people. Then a whole group of bystanders confronts him. 1, 2, 3 times he denies it, each time more forcefully than the last. And then he hears it. The rooster crows for the second time. It's the sound cue, it's the alarm bell that Jesus predicted. And in that one sound, everything comes rushing back. The memory of Jesus' words just cuts through his fear, and the weight of what he's just done hits him like a ton of bricks. And this is the absolute key. He doesn't just run and hide. He doesn't fall into despair. He weeps. This complete emotional breakdown, this genuine sorrow, is the turning point. It's what makes the difference between a temporary human failure and a final permanent betrayal. And this brings everything full circle. Remember way back at the beginning of the night when Jesus predicted they would all scatter? Right after that, he made them this promise. He said that after he was raised, he would meet them again in Galilee. The fact that the awful prophecy about Peter's denial came true in every single detail, well, that makes this promise of restoration and reunion something you can really truly count on. So this whole drama leaves us with this massive question, doesn't it? When we mess up, when we have our own moments of weakness and failure, what's the difference maker? Is it how big the mistake was, or is it how we respond to it? What this story suggests is that even after the worst kind of collapse, the way back starts with that painful moment of recognition and a trust in the promise that there's always a chance for a new beginning.